We finally connected with ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky, who joins us now. And Dan, good to have you with us. Dan Orlovsky's appearances on One Bills Live are presented by Caesars Sportsbook, an official mobile sports betting partner of the Buffalo Bills. And Dan, this is a little bit off the field here. Short week, as we know, for both of these teams. We've seen the Tyreek Hill police situation kind of envelop the team because the media has been constantly bombarding them with questions the last 3 days. How, as a player, do you avoid letting that become a distraction on a short week where your preparation is short to begin with?
Yeah, good to be with you guys again. I think NFL players, I think a lot of high-end athletes have a great ability to compartmentalize things. You know, it's a creature of habit type of profession. And so, I think that a lot of guys are equipped to do that just because of how they've been around the sport and kind of regimented in many ways. Mike McDaniel and the way he's handled it, I do think gives guys in that locker room a little bit more focus, I guess, on really trying to make sure that they're doing everything they can to go play for that coach, just the way that I believe that he's spoken about it. And so I think a lot of guys are, day to day. Hey, it is Tuesday of a Thursday night game week. The most important thing for them and for us is making sure that we're getting all the things that are necessary to get done following that schedule. To be honest with you, like the short Thursday week schedules are so ridiculous anyway, because you basically go even more so sun up to sundown type of thing. There's not a ton of idle time. There's not a ton of time to have conversations outside or give energy outside of to that actual game since the window's so small. So I think guys are more often than not equipped to kind of go handle that.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, too, that you kind of got to deal with. My take has been in the last couple of minutes here on our show is that you get into these short weeks and you see players tend to lean on their support staff, their families, right? They need to be at the stadium sun up to sundown. They're not going to be able to, like I said, you're not going to be able to take the trash out. You're not going to be able to mow the lawn this week. You got to, you're focused on the job, and you really do lean on those people that are in your life that are going to help you do that. I mean, everybody's got that, right? Some guys, it's rare now that you got guys in the NFL that go home to the apartment, it's just them, right?
Yeah.
So everybody, it's all hands on deck in this short week because there's just not enough time. And I think, the game plan is honed down a little bit. Being in a division game helps because you're familiar with these guys. You got some history. But all of that goes into this too, is that this is one of those weeks where, forget this, the Tyreek thing is just another layer on top of what you got to deal with in a week where you don't have time to deal with everything.
Yeah, and I'd say this, Steve, too, like I would imagine both of these teams, because they're well-coached teams and they've been through this before, is they probably spent a decent amount of, that week that's right after essentially the third preseason game, the last preseason game, and you're trying to figure out your team. I would bet both of those teams took part of that week to start preparing for their first and second week opponents, since it is a Thursday game of week 2. So, I guarantee you that Sean and them prepared for Arizona and Miami, and then vice versa. Miami absolutely prepared for Jacksonville and Buffalo to try to get kind of 2 game preparations in advance in that time period. And then so you're not jumping into it for the first time this year in that. So I would imagine both organizations kind of addressed some of the game planning and try to get a jump on it in that week leading up to that final preseason game or final preseason situation or timing.
All right, so Dan, give us your initial impressions of Buffalo's Week 1 performance. Run game looked good early. Passing game wasn't wildly productive, but it was efficient. And, Josh kind of did his thing and took over the game at the appropriate time. But they're staring at, a 14-point deficit in the first half before they kind of got their legs under them.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of conversation or a lot of people make comments in regards to, well, if the Bills are going to win, Josh is going to win MVP because he's going to have to. My take wasn't that after this game. I actually thought, one, I liked their 12 personnel run game. I really did, especially the kind of the zone stuff that they did out of it, and then the tackle pull game. So I thought, and that's not a lot different than what we saw under Joe last year, but I thought it was really not only efficient, but they got some, I don't want to call them chunk runs, but they got some, 8 to 10 yarders out of it. So one, I liked that. Two, I liked some of the RPO, but not a ton of it. There was enough sprinkled RPO in there that I thought was necessary. I thought enough play action, not doing it too much, but having that 3 or 4 snaps a game of it. I also think the biggest question that I kind of wanted to see was, what was Keon like? Was he going to be diversified in his routes? Was he going to be able to win versus man coverage? I think we got that answer. I saw him win on a shallow cross versus man. I saw him win on a go route versus man. And while it wasn't, I don't want to say win on a go route as far as whooping a dude, he went and made the contested catch on the go route. I saw him win on a slant route. I saw him win on a stop route. And so I was actually encouraged by that part of what happened in the game. And I certainly saw Josh make some plays, but that's kind of been the at least projection for this offense, right? We expected a lot more control. My note for the game is controlled on offense. So a lot more control showed itself. Instead of Josh having to make 10, 12, 15 plays, Josh made like 4 or 5. And that's kind of been what I envisioned or hoped, and I kind of saw that. So my big takeaway was Kincaid had 1 catch, and they scored 30 against the defense I think is going to be pretty good.
One of the things we talked about as well was when they did dig themselves a little bit of a hole. Arizona came out and punched him in the mouth pretty good. You can say what you want about, Josh had the turnover early and it led to a 10-0 deficit and all that. But Arizona's offense is going to – there's people out there that think it's going to be a top 10 offense at the end of the year. They think they're really improved. What did you see? The Bills coaching staff at halftime, they came out and they changed some things and adjusted their defensive philosophy at halftime, and it really, really seemed more effective. Kyler threw for 31 yards in the second half, held the Cardinals to 3 points on the board in the second half. So something changed defensively, and I guess you can chalk it up to the coaching adjustments as to why that was.
Yeah, I think so. The two halves. One, there was a little bit unknown of what the offense was going to look like in Arizona. This was the first year that Kyler was going to be healthy in this offense, the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. So there was somewhat of an unknown of kind of like, what were they going to be like? Was it going to be a little bit more spread out? Was it going to be a little bit more under center? Was it going to be a little bit more keeper and play action? Was it going to be RPO centric? So I thought they were trying to feel their way out of it defensively. There were some fire zone pressures that they ran in the first half that they just didn't time up in a good way. And so I think they got caught with that. I'd also say when they brought some of those fire zone pressures early on, Kyler made some big plays with his legs and kind of hurt the defense because just the way that they spun that fire zone and dropped the guy away, it became a really soft edge for Kyler. And so I think in the second half, what you saw was them get a little bit away from some of those off-ball pressures and try to keep more vision and tighter edges. You didn't see Kyler get away with too many runs in the second half. I think he had 2 in the first half that went for almost 50 yards. So you saw a little bit of that. I thought they did a good job of trying to create Greg and Vaughn and some one-on-ones. Greg got home a little bit in the second half. And so I still, my big takeaway from the defense is they got to figure out the timing of their pressures better, especially on a short week, because that was something that stood out to me was just the disconnect between when the ball was getting snapped, when they were triggering their pressures, and when guys were replacing when the blitzer and where they had to be in some of their zones. So I thought the adjustment of trying to make sure that they had a little bit more tighter edges defensively minimized Arizona some on their offensive end.
And then the Dolphins, they kind of had a slow first half against the Jaguars last week. Their run game was not working at all in the early stages. I know I saw this number floating around out there, and I don't know that it means a whole lot, but they had 2 tailbacks on the field more than 52% of the time. Now, I know Achane was splitting out and catching some passes, and I understand why you're putting that guy on the field. He's a speed demon. But maybe just kind of give us your initial impressions as to whether or not anything is dramatically different in McDaniel's offense, and then third new defensive coordinator in 3 years for the Dolphins defense. Is there anything dramatically different on that side of the ball for them scheme-wise?
Yeah, so offensively, I think, what I saw was an kind of like Mike McDaniel saying, hey, we can't block Jacksonville's front. Jacksonville's got a pretty darn good front.
Yeah.
And I don't think they tried one, they don't want to hold the football, but even more so, there was probably 6 or 8 different versions of catch it now perimeter screens. And it was a little bit more of I don't think we can block them. They got a really good front. I don't want to hold on to the football. And let's make sure that's kind of what Achane was doing, was they would motion him out and almost like if you took a slot receiver and lined him 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage almost, that's kind of where he got to. And it was just quick screen after quick screen after quick screen and really trying to make the defense not only run, but week 1. And this is kind of week 1.5 Thursday night, like tackle really well out when you're running full speed and you're trying to see all those different things is trying to get to a landmark and tackle really well. So I think they tried to utilize that a ton. They also took advantage, this is something that Buffalo defensively is going to have to handle. And, with new safety groups is, the 2 big plays that Miami, it's 2 massive plays in the second half, one for, I want to say 65 and one for 80. It's really them kind of showing something on tape in the first half of how they were going to handle a certain formation or action, and Miami countering offensively what Jacksonville was doing and realizing, okay, you're doing this, we're going to do that. So it is going to be really important. Last year when those 2 teams played, I didn't see that out of Miami. And last year when they played, Buffalo was relatively consistent with how they were playing defense, with that shell defense and really playing that inside leverage and carrying everything. Miami will have a counter to that. So that'll be really important. And then for Miami's defense, I would say this. I think that the best thing that Jacksonville did, Trevor made some big throws, but Jacksonville put 2 and 3 tight ends on the field and just pounded the football at Miami. And Miami couldn't stop it for most of the game. I mean, Javon Honlin punches the ball out at the 1 yard line. Now it's 24-7. So I think this, bodes well for some bigger body and multiple like tight ends on the field and really challenging the interior of Miami's defense to stop a consistent forced run game.
Do you think that's a trend? I was noticing around the league. I read somewhere that like the average yardage thrown by was like 187 yards league wide. And all of a sudden, everybody's running. Is that just a week 1?
Well, yeah. I mean, it drives me furious. You guys have heard me say this before. So this has been coming for years, and teams just didn't adjust. And teams have realized, okay, the dynamic element of 1, the receivers are so talented and so fast. 2, the RPO game and the ball gets out of the quarterback's hands so quickly. And 3, like if you give up explosive plays, it's so hard to play nowadays defensive football, and you can't hit guys as much. So way more teams are playing with nickel on the field. You guys obviously are notorious for it. They're playing way more shell coverage. And when I got into the league almost 25 years ago now, it was, we're going to make you drive the length of the field and we're going to keep everything. And teams are very much so abiding by that philosophy. And we still see way too many offenses in the NFL line their quarterbacks up in shotgun, play with speed on the field only, and it's dink and dunk offense. And they think that they're going to be good at that over 4 quarters. And you might have a drive or 2 out of it if you don't put your quarterback under center more than you did years ago. And if you don't change your personnel to have bigger bodies on and try to make sure that you run defenses out of that, Steve, you know that. You got to run defenses out of that to bring another person down, or you have to play action them out of that. I've said that. And teams just aren't willing to do it right now. And I think it's a thing that's sweeping across the NFL for sure.
Yeah. I remember having you on last year, Dan. You were banging that play action drum from under center time and time again. I saw the Bills do it a little bit last week. Hopefully there's more of that to come.
How much of this pistol alleviates a little bit of the under center thing?
So here's my thing with the pistol. I get it. I got into this with someone the other day about Atlanta because Atlanta lined up in gun and shotgun the whole time. The pistol I think presents the ability to try and do a lot of the stuff that was under center. I still don't think it allows the tailback to get his shoulders squared downhill. I still don't think it allows the defense to see stuff at the same level. Like when you're a quarterback and you're under center and I get that snap and I open up left or open up right, that defense has got to come flat down the line of scrimmage, and it's really hard for them to see that ball. Now, it happens a little bit in the pistol. I just don't, in my opinion, I don't think it shows the same way. Obviously, Miami's mastered being in the gun a lot too, but that's because of some of the speed and the motions that they've implemented to their offense. The Rams can do it a little bit. The pistol, I think, is, I guess, if you're unwilling to go under center and you want to be in some form of the gun, it's the marriage in between. I just don't think defenses respect it nearly as much as under center stuff.
Right.
Dan, thanks for the time as always. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, guys.